You're the happiest cancer patient I've ever seen. I was having tea with a friend of mine, and she just happens to be a psychotherapist. So when I heard those words come out of her mouth, you're the happiest cancer patient I've ever seen. And she didn't say it in a good way. She said it more in a kind of you realize how unusual this is, and are you sure you're okay kind of way. I was shocked, and not because her words weren't true, but because they were. I was happy, even though I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer just a couple of weeks before our conversation. In fact, from the moment when my family doctor sat down in the consulting room and the first words out of her mouth were, "I'm afraid it's bad news," I don't remember feeling upset. I wasn't sad. I certainly wasn't angry. And it's not that I can't feel those things. In fact, I sometimes think that in my lifetime, I've felt probably more of those things than most people do. But for some reason, I wasn't feeling them for my cancer. And so, in the days and the weeks and ultimately the months following that conversation with my friend, when she told me that I was a too happy cancer patient, I really struggled to try and understand what made me so different, so unusual, so much of an anomaly. And the more I thought about it, the more I started to wonder if it might have something to do with my martial arts practice. Now, at the time that I'd been diagnosed with breast cancer, I'd been practicing the martial art of aikido for more than a year, and I was head over heels in love with aikido. In fact, my friends would probably tell you I was more than a little obsessed with aikido. And one of the things I loved so much about aikido was that, unlike most martial arts, which teach you how to hurt somebody else, how to actually cause harm to another human being, and maybe even kill another human being, aikido teaches you only how to defend yourself against attack. In fact, we not only teach how to get away from being the victim of an attack, but as much as possible, we're trained to leave our attacker unharmed as well. And I love that about aikido. The way we practice, or the way aikido works, is a little counterintuitive. I mean, if I came up to one of you right now and I tried to punch you in the head, your first instinct would probably be to flinch and to pull back, to try and get out of the way of my arm, to get out of my reach, to turn away, to run away, to curl up, certainly not to let me touch you. And in aikido, on the other hand, we're trained over and over and over again, dozens of times every class. And by the time that I had been diagnosed with breast cancer, I had about 400 hours of aikido classes under my belt. We're trained to move towards our attacker, towards all that pain that's possibly coming towards us. And not only that, we're trained to physically connect with our attacker, to actually physically touch them. Because by touching them, when we can take them off balance and control the situation. And so I realized that my aikido training taught me that if stuff was coming at me that was going to hurt me, I didn't have to run. In fact, I could move forward. I had a choice. I could actually get up close and dirty with the stuff that was coming at me. And there were things that I could do to make the situation better. I had some control over the situation. Now, one of the other things that we teach in Aikido is how to fall safely. We practice in pairs with a partner, and we take turns back and forth. First, one person pretending to be the attacker, and then pretending to be the person defending themselves against an attack. And we know that as part of our practice, the person who's pretending to do the attack is going to probably end up on the ground as part of the practice. Many of our techniques involve throwing our attacker to the ground, and we don't want to get hurt when we practice, and we don't want to hurt each other, and we want to keep practicing as much as possible during class. So we learn how to fall safely, how to do forward rolls and backwards rolls, how to slap the mat with our arms and dissipate the energy. And not only that, we learn how to use the momentum of the fall itself to get ourselves back up again as quickly as possible. There's a saying in martial arts that goes, fall down 7 times, get up 8. And what that means is that there's no shame in falling. In fact, in Aikido, it's actually part of how we learn, it's part of how we train. We're supposed to fall, and we want to get good at falling. I actually, in addition to the 400 hours of Aikido classes I had at the time of my diagnosis, I'd spent extra time on my own, outside of class, practicing how to fall and how to get back up again. So I realized that what I had taught myself was that even if I did fall, as long as I was getting back up again each time I fell, it was all good. Finally, one of my very favorite kinds of techniques in Aikido is a group of techniques called irimi, or entering techniques. And irimi techniques, unlike most Aikido techniques, which are truly self-defensive, where you are waiting for the attacker to make the first move and come towards you, and then you respond. In irimi techniques, we're training for a very precise kind of timing. And we're watching for that moment when our attacker is at one of their most vulnerable points. And that's the moment when they're loading up their arm to hit us, and the arm is actually moving away from us rather than towards us. And if we can, in that moment, leap forward and get right up in our attacker's face and block their arm, we can take them off balance at a moment when we need to put in the least amount of energy. And I love practicing irimi techniques. There's a kind of physical thrill to it. It reminds me of when I was a kid, actually, and was learning how to play jump rope. And you'd have 2 people, one on each end, spinning the rope, and you'd be the one wanting to jump in and jump, and you'd have to watch for that moment, that gap, when you could get under the rope and not get slapped by the rope and not get hurt. And if you did it, it felt amazing, and then you could jump. And that's really kind of how I feel when I practice irimi techniques, that kind of, I did it, I blocked them, I got them at the right moment. And so I'm here more than a year later, after having a double mastectomy and losing both my breasts, after having been through 5 months of chemotherapy, losing my hair, having horrific side effects from the chemo. And I'm here telling you that entering cancer's attack felt amazing. And honestly, I think that's why I was so happy. Now, what I've just shared with you is a speech that I prepared for a networking event called Mo Mondays, and I gave it in November 2016 in London, Ontario, Canada. And I created this video so that my friends and family who couldn't be there that night can hear what I wanted to say. But I don't want to end this video here. I hope that you found it inspiring, but I don't want it to be one of those things that makes you feel good and then you move on and you never make a change in your own life that can have the same kind of impact that my aikido practice has had in mine. So I want to offer really humbly a couple of suggestions if you're thinking to yourself, you know what, I really want that for myself. I really would love to be able to meet challenges in my life with a resilience like that. My first suggestion would be I don't think it would hurt you to start a martial arts practice, and I'm not saying you have to. It has to be Aikido, although, of course, that would be my first choice for everyone. But what I've noticed about the people that I know in my life who have a black belt in any martial art is that they have that resilience that comes from hours and hours of practicing difficult things and of being a beginner and doing it anyhow and working through, even if it's hard. And so, most black belts that I know, they have a kind of discipline and a focus that can help them through difficult times. Now, you might be saying, you know what, martial arts doesn't appeal to me. I really don't think it's for me. That's okay. Some books that I might recommend that you read that would give you some practical suggestions for moving forward and trying some difficult things in your own life are the following. I would really recommend a book called The Flinch by Julien Smith. And in The Flinch, Smith talks about how that moment when we flinch away from something difficult or something hard is probably the moment when we most need to pay attention and move forward and do the hard thing that we really don't want to do. And he offers a lot of practical suggestions for practicing meeting resistance. And I think for me, that's the key, is that it has to become a practice. If it's something that you want to have as an enduring quality, you really need to do it over and over and over again. Another book I would recommend, maybe if you're a woman and none of this has appealed to you so far, is a book called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. And you may know who Rhimes is. She's the creator of some amazing TV, including Grey's Anatomy and Scandal. And in The Year of Yes, she talks about how for a whole year, she made the decision that she was going to say yes to every opportunity that presented itself to her, even, or maybe especially, the ones that scared her. And it was so amazing to hear the positive change that made in her life when she finished that year, and all of the things that were hard that she'd said yes to, how that had changed her. Another book I would recommend, especially if you're a creator or someone who wants to bring something into this world, maybe even an entrepreneur who's got a business idea or a nonprofit idea or a way that you want to make a difference in the world. I would really recommend a book called The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. And again, he has a lot of practical suggestions for just doing the work and creating a practice for yourself that makes you show up day after day after day and do the stuff that's hard. Another book that I would recommend is When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. And she's got many books that are wonderful. She also has one called The Places That Scare You. And in her book, she really talks about not running away from those hard things, but sitting with them. And they often lose their power when we spend time with the stuff that scares us the most. And finally, if you're deciding that you do want to make a change in your life, you want to do something different, you want to develop a practice and you're not quite sure how to do that, one more thing I would recommend is a website called Zen Habits by a guy named Leo Babauta. And he offers in Zen Habits some really simple, easy to understand, easy to put into practice tips for changing habits in your life, for making really little changes. It doesn't have to be something huge. So as I'm looking towards the new year and thinking of everything I want for the world, I hope that this helps you a little bit. Thank you.